got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Welcome to the Weekly Sports Guy podcast. I'm your host, Ashton Alcock, and today we're going to finish up my season predictions. I was supposed to do yesterday, then there was something wrong with the file. I just didn't sound good. It was low, and when I tried to adjust it higher, it just sounded a little weird. Today I made sure that mistake won't happen. But we're going to start off with the NFC South, then we'll go into the NFC West, we'll go through their standings, then we'll go through the playoffs, my award predictions, and then my mock draft. And then I will let you guys know about my next series I will be doing next week. So it should be a fun one. So let's get into it. Starting with the Atlanta Falcons. This team, man. You got a young quarterback, Michael Penix. You got a couple pieces like Drake London, like Kyle Pitts, who hasn't really done much. Darnell Mooney was pretty good with you guys. You got Bijan Robinson, who's one of the better backs in the league. But, like, man, it's just like when you look at this team, you're like, oh, again. It's the story you repeat yourself, right? When you think about it, when you look before we looked, you can go into many sports. Like, sometimes just repeating yourself doesn't work. And realistically, this offseason, they extended Jake Matthews. They brought back Mike Hughes, brought back Kevin King, solid pieces, but none of them are really electrifying. But then they brought in Divine Diablo. He's a solid linebacker. Leonard Floyd's solid, but he's not the same player he used to be. And then we went to the draft. You get three players I do like in safeties: Xavier Watts, James Pierce Jr., and Jalen Walker. The only problem is James Pierce Jr. has problems listening to the coaching staff. He has attitude problems, and it's been talked throughout so much while he was at Tennessee. Great player, though. Physical specimen. He can get to the quarterback. Jalen Walker, steal at 15. I thought he was going way before that, but granted, this draft had very much twists and turns all over the place. When you realistically look at it, we saw Colson Loveland going 10 overall. I believe it was 10, right? If I'm wrong, you can put in the comments. But when you look at it, you're like, well, this draft's a little weird, right? We had the Jaguars trading up. Their new young GM, as the first time, makes the bold move, which you never typically see. And then you got like the Falcons, who gave up a first-round pick to move up to 26 for a defensive end who probably would have went in the second round, where you could have traded up like maybe 6 or 7 spots in the second round and got your guy in James Pierce Jr. So that move, to me, the player, fine. The move, bad. I'm going to give it a C- just because of that trade. It didn't make that trade, and if he fell in the second round, this, to me, is probably a B+ draft. But that trade, for me, just was like, what were you thinking? But going to their schedule, they got the Buccaneers week 1. They lose. Have Minnesota Sunday Night Football. They win. Then they beat Carolina, and Carolina lose to Washington, going 2-2. No, actually 3-1. My fault. Tampa is actually a win. Then they go into their bye week. Buffalo. They lose to Buffalo, San Fran, Miami, I believe it is. Yes, it's Miami. Lose to the Patriots, then beat Indianapolis, so the season kind of starts to fall. Then they lose to Carolina, beat New Orleans, beat the Jets, beat Seattle, get back on a win streak, lose to Tampa in a split in Tampa. Then they beat the Cardinals, lose to the Rams, beat the Saints, going 8-9. Same record as last year, but this year is more just a building stage. Like, let's not worry about the playoffs. The playoffs will come with the wins, and the wins will come once you start getting a groove. You only saw like 5 games of Penix last year. He looks solid. Let's see what you have in him. Let's see what you have in Kyle Pitts. He hasn't been good since they drafted him in 2021. He's been considered one of the bigger busts we've seen. He was a guy who was supposed to change the tight end position. He was a fast guy with great hands, and we haven't seen that. We've seen the speed, and when he does get the ball in his hands, he does make plays, but the question is getting the ball in his hands, and it's not from the quarterback. It's him catching the ball. He's had a high drop rate in the last few years, and to realistically think about it, what has this defense done either? Last year, they were one of the worst teams to get to the quarterback. Obviously, they solved it this year with getting Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., bringing in Leonard Floyd. But I don't think they're going to be game changers year one. Like, I think they'll show strides in getting to the quarterback. But realistically, what's your up front going to look like? Okay, you have your edge rushers, but what are your D tackles? You lost Grady Jarrett to the Bears this offseason. You didn't bring in a D tackle other than Morgan Fox, who's a role player. Looking at this team, it's very, very much poor defensively. You have A.J. Terrell and Jesse Bates, who are two great secondary players. But after that, you kind of dwindle down on that roster. The linebackers are all right. But it's like they're not the same team. When you thought about the Falcons in that mid-2010s and the year they went to the Super Bowl, they had a great defense. Their defense was ferocious with also a good offense. But now you look and you're like, well, their offense is solid. They could put up points. But when it comes down to closing out a game, you're like, well, no. Amount of games last year that were winnable games that either the offense caused the issues or it was the defense or both. Those games where like the offense would throw 4 picks because of Kirk Cousins and then the defense wouldn't make a stop. And obviously I understand like, oh, the defense probably played so much. But again, they didn't stop the ball in the beginning and they didn't stop the ball at the end. So obviously there's a problem. And you have a defensive-minded head coach in Raheem Morris who his first stint as a head coach didn't work out. But guess what? You're giving them a second chance. Typically, the second time around, they typically get better. And you see it many times. Sean Payton has been better with the Broncos than sometimes when he was with the Saints. Jim Harbaugh, first time the Niners was good, but he's gone his 1 year at Chargers. They're a completely different team than they were with Brandon Staley, right? Pete Carroll, his third time around, was phenomenal. Like after he went from the Jets to the Patriots, he went from bad to mediocre, and then he went to Seattle and he was phenomenal. These second or third stints of these coaches are typically like the wake up calls. Like, oh wow, wait, they already have enough experience though. They had experience being bad. They had experience being okay. Now let's put all what I learned then and put it together, right? Mike Vrabel, I expect him to be better than he was in Tennessee, and he was already a great coach in Tennessee. Right, and now he's going to New England, a team he played for. So, granted, I think Raheem Morris is going to be a good coach. I don't think he's going to be a great coach, but a good coach. And I could see them filling at 8-9 right now. I could see them going 9-8, maybe 10-7 as the max of this team. But right now, I have them at 8-9. As long as you see improvement from Michael Penix, that's great. The next team we'll talk about is the Carolina Panthers, another team with a young quarterback in Bryce Young, former number 1 overall pick. And something I do want to mention, because I've seen this all over Twitter recently, every time they played Jacksonville week 1, they went to the Super Bowl. So back in 2004, they went to the Super Bowl, played Jacksonville week 1. The year prior, they had a losing season with a young quarterback, right, on the verge of breakout, a young coach, a little bit unexperienced or first-year head coach. Then Ohio State won the national championship. And the year and after, they played Jacksonville week 1 with Super Bowl. Then fast forward another 10 years. 2014, they had a losing season. They had a young quarterback on the verge of wanting to break out. He showed potential. In the few years prior, they had a younger head coach, a little bit unexperienced. They played Jacksonville week 1 in 2015. They went Super Bowl. You want to know who won the national championship a year prior? Ohio State. And then this past year, they had a losing record. They have an unexperienced head coach. They have a quarterback on the verge of breaking out. They played Jacksonville week 1. You want to know who just won the national championship? The Ohio State Buckeyes, right? Obviously, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's just a weird coincidence that it's all falling the same way. But if it happens, I think they just need to pray and hope that Ohio State wins the national championship everywhere because they'll be in the Super Bowl. But also, again, the last 2 times they went to the Super Bowl with the same scenario, they lost. So maybe they don't want to go to the Super Bowl like this because they'll lose. Maybe they want to just go on their own without Ohio State winning, maybe without having a losing season, without having the breakout quarterback, maybe without having an unexperienced coach or first-time head coach. Maybe they have the first-time head coach take them to the Super Bowl, then they win, but without Ohio State and all that stuff before it. But going to their moves, they brought back Andy Dalton. He was a good serviceable backup. He played for a few games after they benched Bryce Young. Then they brought back out Bryce Young, which actually worked miracles. He looked a lot better than he did his rookie year and the first few games of the season. Brian Rico Dowdle, he'll be a solid backup. Brian Hunter Renfro, he was good in Vegas, but he's been out for a year. Tommy Tremble, solid tight end. Brought in a lot of solid pieces. Re-signed J.C. Horton on a 4-year extension worth over $100 million with $70 million guaranteed. To me, that deal was like, he hasn't been great. It's one of those moves where you're like, he's been good, but he hasn't been great. And now you have other corners like Sauce Gardner, Christian Gonzalez, who are currently still on their rookie contract. And I know Sauce Gardner, after the season, will be up for a contract extension, going with 2 years left with the 5th-year option. And then after next year, it'd be Christian Gonzalez. And those two corners are better. So what are they going to get? 150, 160, $200 million? Like, the money in the NFL is getting worse, and you especially see with quarterbacks. Like, they're going to be a team that might be screwed over, because if Bryce Young turns out to be a stud of a quarterback, a franchise guy, he's probably better than Brock Purdy, and he just got 265, which we'll talk about when we get to the NFC West. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do there? Now what? You're going to pay him $300 million? Maybe Bryce Young is nice enough to take a big pay cut, which I think he would be, especially if you can try to guarantee him a championship appearance or fighting for a championship. And then the other moves, they brought in Bobby Brown III, solid to bring up against next to Derek Brown. They brought in Tershawn Wharton on a 3-year deal from Kansas City. They did that move after they missed out on Milton Williams, who, according to Adam Schefter, did sign with them or agreed to terms. Obviously, he couldn't officially sign. It was on Monday. Deals didn't go officially through until Wednesday, when the new year started, when free agency began back in March. But then Milton Williams ends up getting a $26 million a year offer from the New England Patriots. From Ian Rappaport reported that. So he ends up taking the Patriots deal, which I understand. I think he was going to take $26 million over 20. He's getting coached by now Mike Vrabel, but they end up quickly swerving over to Tershawn Wharton. He's a solid D tackle. I don't think he's like phenomenal. He's not as good as Milton Williams, but you had to pivot somewhere, and they pivoted and going to get Bobby Brown and Tershawn Wharton. They basically were saying, hey, if we can't get the production out of one, maybe we can get production out of two guys, pair them up with Derek Brown. Milton Williams and Derek Brown would have been a scary interior duo. Like, that would have been terrifying. Like, imagine the pressure coming up the middle, and now your quarterback has to go out. So they also brought in Trayvon Morey. He's a solid safety for them. He was very solid, especially in Vegas. Now he's going to come here. And I thought their draft was actually pretty good. They got Tedero McMillan in the first round. They 6'6" monster receiver. And I seen some clips from him from OTAs. He looks a lot faster than the media put him out as. I thought he was faster than what the media put out, because he ran like a 4.6, a 4.5, I think, 40. Let me double check. Like, I think we look at Tedero, if I can spell his name. Oh, there it is. If you look at his, like, when we go to him, he's a 6'6" dude. He's a beast of a monster. Well, they have him listed as 6'4". I think he's more like 6'5", 6'6". He does weigh 219, so he's going to be a little bit on the smaller end. But when, like, obviously his release isn't as great as some of the other receivers in this draft, but he ran a 4.48. So it's like, it's good, but it's like, they looked at it, and then, like, his 3-cone shuffle wasn't as good as what some other receivers are. I'm like, he's different. He's built different. He's the best, in my opinion, was the best receiver in this draft class itself. I know people are like, oh, there's Travis Hunter. I don't think Travis Hunter is really that good of a receiver. I don't think he was really that good of a corner. I think it's just the idea of an athlete, a two-way athlete in the NFL, is just very enticing, because if you can get it to work out, you have a threat on both sides. The issue is I don't think it works out, and we saw it. His route running is very mediocre. When you looked at he went on a corner route. I know we talked about when we went to the NFC South, but when I watched that curl route, he almost got lost down the field. When he was doing his stop to turn, he pretty much kept going. His body wanted to keep going instead of turning. And then he went on an out route, and he missed the ball. And then he's throwing a deep medium in route, and it wasn't a sharp turn. It was more of a curve. And when you're running an in route or an out route, and any coach would tell you this, and I learned it in high school, was it's not supposed to round. Like, you're not supposed to round. It's supposed to be a 90-degree angle. You're supposed to turn your body 90 degrees, so when you make that cut, the corner has no chance coming with you. Because typically, especially when it's man-on-man, they follow you. And if you go 90 degrees, they're not going to turn 90 degrees because they're going to start being behind you. So they try to round out. Next thing you know, you're already inside with the ball in your hands, and they're making a tackle, but you already had the first down. So stuff like that is, I think, Tedero McMillan. I think McMillan's way better down the field. I think he's not the best route runner, but he has the speed, so you could put him anywhere you want. And I think when he catches the ball, he has gain speed, and that is something you don't teach. And then the second and third rounds, in 2 through 4, I think they got a bunch of steals. They got Nick Scorrington from Texas A&M. He's really good. They got Princely Umamielen from Mississippi. He's really good. They got Trevor Etienne. I do like him, the running back out of Georgia. And they got the safety out of Ohio State, Lathan Ransom. Obviously, next year they're going to have even better with Caleb Downs coming into the league. And then the 6th round, they also got Jimmy Horn Jr. He was a solid receiver, Colorado. I overall give their offseason a B. They learned how to pivot quickly when they lost like Milton Williams. Now going to their schedule. Sorry, Panthers fans, it's not going to look pretty to start off. I have them losing to Jacksonville, losing to Arizona, losing to Atlanta, losing to the Patriots, losing to Miami, beating Dallas. So don't worry, they're not going to go 0-6. They'll lose to the Jets, lose to Buffalo, lose to Green Bay, beat the Saints, lose to Atlanta, lose to San Fran, lose to the Rams, going into their bye week, week 14. Then I have them losing to New Orleans, beating Tampa, beating Seattle, losing to Tampa. 4-13. Again, I'm going to say it's basically growth on the quarterback. I wouldn't really worry about making the playoffs. Obviously, everyone wants to make the playoffs. That's the goal. Patriots want to do it. The Jaguars want to do it. The Falcons want to do it. You could say every team wants to do it. But guess what? There's sometimes we just need to learn to, hey, we have a tougher schedule. Hey, let's see what we have in Bryce Young. Because you know what? If hypothetically this Bryce Young experience doesn't work out, you trade him next offseason to a team maybe like the Pittsburgh Steelers might be interested. Like, hey, we'll take a flyer on this kid. They did with Justin Fields last year. Maybe they'll take a flyer on Bryce Young. And maybe the Panthers are bad enough where they can go get a Garrett Nussmeier or a Carson Beck or Drew Aller who might be sitting in the quarterback's room next year's draft. And you're like, hey, that's a guy we want. But 4-13, I don't think they're going to be a great team next year. They also have kind of a tougher schedule. If you really look at it, Jacksonville's probably around the same level as them. Cardinals are, I think, slightly better. The Falcons, I think, are better. The Patriots are probably one of the most improved teams. Dolphins are better. I think they pull up the upset against Dallas. I think they pull up the upset against the Jets. They lose to the Jets, and the Jets slightly better. Bills are one of the best teams in the league. Packers, I think, are better. Saints, I think Saints are worse, but I think they just somehow split. But I could see them winning both games and going 5-12. Falcons, again, Niners are better. Rams are better. Bucks are better. Seahawks are better. But I think they'll split with the Bucks just because it's a division rival. And typically what's ends up happening is you'll see that surprise win with one of the worst teams in your division. I think this is just, again, a growing year for the Panthers. I think next year is the year where they compete, but not this year. Next team going on is the New Orleans Saints. Not really much to cover here. They go get Kelvin Banks, Tyler Shuck in the draft. I'm just going to do a quick sum of what they did. Brought back Cam Jordan, who wanted to return. Chase Young, they brought in a 3-year deal. They go get Devon Godshaw, who's not the same player he used to be. They brought in Justin Reid, solid safety. He can play kicker if he really needed to. And then in the draft, they got, like I said, Kelvin Banks Jr., Tyler Shuck, and pretty much a bunch of depth pieces. I'm giving the offseason a C-. They also waited last minute to get a coach, too. They waited until after the Super Bowl, or like every spot was filled up. And they had Mike McCarthy sitting there, which I knew they were interested in, but they didn't want Kelly Moore, and they ended up getting him. Going to this season, all I'll say is weeks 1 through 14 isn't pretty. They lose to the Cardinals, lose to the Niners, lose to the Seahawks, lose to the Bills, lose to the Giants, lose to the Patriots, lose to the Bears, lose to the Bucks, lose to the Rams, lose to the Panthers, go to the bye week, lose to the Falcons, lose to the Dolphins, lose to the Bucks, beat the Panthers. That was that win. Lose to the Jets, lose to the Titans, lose to the Falcons. They're going 1-16. This team's in capital, like they're in a big capital hole. Like when you really think about it, like you see the little holes, like for a flower, like they have these jars here, right? You typically build like that's probably a deep hole that you would put an actual flower in when you get it from the store, or maybe you get a little bigger because the flower is a little bit bigger. They are in a hole that you probably build to put in a foundation for a house. I think if they can go a couple years without spending, letting some of these bigger contracts go, I think in 2 seasons they're back financially stable. Maybe they should move off him, like Demario Davis, throw like a second-round pick with him. Maybe it's like a 3-year from now second-round pick. Some team, maybe like the Jets, who maybe need some help at middle linebacker, maybe a Seahawks or some team that needs help at middle linebacker might go, hey, I'll take that second-round pick. I'll give you our 4th-round pick this year. You're getting extra draft capital this year, but maybe you won't have a second-round pick in 2 years. But in 2 years, you're already replacing him because in free agency you go out and you steal a nice young linebacker. Maybe like a person like Nakobe Dean from the Eagles. Maybe he gets cut. Maybe it doesn't work out there. Now you get him on a cheap deal. Maybe it's like a 4-year, $26 million deal in 3 years. And that's a steal. That's like, oh, hey, maybe he comes out to be something. But 1-16 is realistically where I see this team. They have a really, really tough schedule. Again, like the Panthers, a lot of these teams are better. Even the Panthers are better. I just have them randomly splitting. I just think it'll be one of those random wins that the Saints will get. The last team we're going to cover is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had a quite interesting offseason. They brought back Godwin. They brought in Sterling Shepard. They brought in Hassan Reddick. He's solid. They brought in Levante David. Hassan Reddick, I know he didn't really play much. He kind of whined his way out of New York. And then we go to the draft. They drafted Emeka Egbuka. To me, was a little questionable, but he's a good player, so maybe they're afraid Chris Godwin doesn't come back the same. They go out and get Egbuka. Benjamin Morrison, I did like that pickup. And Tez Johnson in the 7th round is a flyer. The only thing is he will need to beef up his body. He is a little smaller than some other players. He weighs only like 150 pounds. So it's a little different. What else is there? There's like that's pretty much it, but they're still the best team, clearly by far. But what's it called? When you go to their schedule, I lost a couple of words there. I think they're the best team in this. They lose to the Falcons week 1. They beat Houston, beat the Jets, beat Philly, beat Seattle, beat the Niners, beat Detroit, beat New Orleans, going 8-1 going into their bye week 9. Week 10, they beat the Patriots, lose to Buffalo, lose to the Rams, beat the Cardinals, beat New Orleans, lose to Atlanta, lose to Carolina, beat Miami, beat Carolina, going 12-5. If you are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're going to take that any day. This division's pretty much a weak division. You'll have like the Falcons who will be competitive. I think the Panthers, even though they're 4-13, will be a very competitive team. I think there'll be close games, close losses, but I think realistically they take away with this division. Now going to the NFC West, the Niners, Rams, Cardinals, Seattle. Let's take a look at their rosters. Let's check out their moves before we get into the final part of this, going through my predictions of the playoffs, my draft schedule, my award predictions. We're going to start off with the Cardinals. They brought in Jacoby Brissett to be a backup. Zay Jones was solid for them. Extended Trey McBride. They brought in Baron Browning. They re-signed him after acquiring him at last year's trade deadline. Brought in Josh Sweat. Brought back Calais Campbell, who started his career there like 10 years ago. And again, a bunch of depth pieces. Then the draft, they get Walter Nolan, probably the best pick in the draft, Bull Johnson in the 2nd round. They also get Denzel Burke, a corner from Ohio State I did like. I also like linebacker Cody Simon from Ohio State. I'm a Buckeyes fan, so I kind of know them a lot more than I know some other prospects. I do a deep dive once the season's over for college, and then obviously when the NFL's over, especially when my team was out in the New England Patriots, I typically just kind of like do a deep dive into a lot of these prospects. So by the time the draft comes, I know a lot of these names. Some names I still wouldn't know because sometimes I just didn't go deep into like certain positions. Like Like Hayden Connor from Texas, I don't really know much about because it wasn't really that deep of a guard draft anyway. It was very top heavy, like Greg Zabel, Trevor Booker, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. Like after that, it was pretty much just like maybe a couple backups here and there. Like it was very much like a tight end deep draft. You had Eric Arroyo, who went to the Seahawks, which we'll talk about in a second. You had Mason Taylor, who went to the Jets. Tyler Warren to the Colts. Colson Loveland, like I said, went to the Bears. So it's like really some of these positions were very, very much depth pieces. It wasn't a very strong draft like we've seen other years. But going into their schedule, I think they're going to be a solid team this year. I don't think they're going to be, oh my God, this is the best team in the league, but this is also not, to me, not going to be the worst team in the league. They start off in New Orleans. They win. Then they beat the Carolina Panthers at home, lose in San Fran, beat Seattle at home on Thursday Night Football, beat the Titans, beat the Colts, beat the lose to the Packers going to the bye week, lose to Dallas on Monday Night Football, lose to Seattle, beat San Fran, beat Jacksonville. Then they go on a little bit of a losing streak to Tampa, the Rams, and Houston's in weeks 13, 14, 15. Beat Atlanta, lose to the Bengals, and then lose to the Rams again, and go 8-9. I think it's a solid year. We gotta see what you have in Kyler Murray. He had good years before, then he's been injured. He hasn't really been the same. So 8-9 is a very solid year for this team. For the Rams, the next team we're going to be covering, their offseason's a little different. They thought they were going to trade Stafford. They ended up bringing him back on a restructured contract. They brought in Devontae Adams to replace Cooper Kupp, who they eventually released, who went to division rival Seattle, which we'll talk about in a second. Re-signed Tutu Atwell, who's been solid. Brought back Alaric Jackson, who's been solid for them. Brought in Puna Ford on a 3-year deal. He's a solid defender. And they re-signed Willis Spoon to a 1-year deal. And then the draft, again, they traded back, which made no sense to me. You barely had picks anyway. I understand you wanted to accumulate more picks. But then you go on the first pick, you take Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. He's a good tight end. I'm not saying by far he's a bad player. It's just I didn't think where you guys took him was the spot you should have taken him. I think there's other players on the board that they should have went. They also got Josiah Stewart, Ty Hamilton, Pooh Paul Jr., or Poe, I don't know how you pronounce his name, and a Kanata Mumpfield, the wide receiver from Pittsburgh. Overall, giving it a C. It wasn't the prettiest season of all, off-season for them, but getting back Stafford's been huge. Now let's look at their schedule. They got Houston, they lose. Then they play Tennessee, they win. Then they lose to Philly, win against the Colts, win against San Fran, lose to Baltimore, beat Jacksonville going to their bye week, which is solid. They go, 4-3. That's not that bad. Then they lose to New Orleans, lose to the Niners, going under 500. And then weeks 11 through 15, I had them winning, beating Seattle, beating Tampa, beating Cardinals, beating Arizona, beating Detroit, losing to Seattle, beating Atlanta, losing to the Cardinals, going 10-7. I think that's a solid year. They're far away from contending for a championship, but they're also far away from being awful. So 10-7 is a good spot. Next team we're covering is the San Francisco 49ers. Very interesting team, very interesting draft as well. They signed Brock Purdy to a $265 million deal. Didn't think it was worth it. He said he deserved more, but he also wanted to bring in other pieces. Again, $265, I don't think really helping much on your team anyway. Then they extended George Kittle and Fred Warner to also a 4-year deal for $76 million for George Kittle and a 3-year, $63 million for Fred Warner. Then a bunch of depth pieces. They brought back Kyle Juszczyk after they released him. They brought in Mac Jones to be a backup. And then the draft, they got Michael Williams, whose goal is to win a Super Bowl this year. And again, a bunch of depth pieces. Going into their schedule, I have them beating Seattle, beating New Orleans, beating Arizona, beating Jacksonville, losing to the Rams, losing to the Bucs, beating Atlanta, beating Houston, beating the Giants, beating the Rams, losing to Arizona, beating the Panthers, beating the Browns, going to their Week 14 bye week, beating Tennessee, beating Indianapolis, beating Chicago. Oh no, losing to Chicago, losing to Seattle, going 12-5. I originally had going 11-6, but I realized I made a mistake somewhere in my schedule for the Rams, so I wanted to fix that. And then the final team is the Seattle Seahawks, which I don't think are great anyway. The offseason they lost what's his name, DK Metcalf, and they replaced MVS and Marquez Fowles and Scantling, Cooper Kupp. They traded away Geno Smith, got Sam Darnold, and again they brought in DeMarcus Lawrence and Ernest Jones. They brought back DeMarcus Lawrence. They brought in a 3-year worth $42. Good player, but he's getting old. And then in the draft, they brought in Gray Zabel, the guard out of North Dakota State. He could also play center. Nick Amonowori, the safety, which I thought was a steal from South Carolina. Then they brought in tight end Elijah Arroyo, which I mentioned earlier, from Miami. He's quick and fast. He's got good hands. Then they got in Jalen Milroe. And then after that, pretty much a bunch of depth pieces like Torrey Horton. David Martinez is good. I do like him for depth. Ricky Wright III from UNLV will be solid. Overall, I give their offseason a B. And then going into their schedule, I have been losing to San Fran, losing to Pittsburgh, beating the Saints, losing Arizona, losing to the Bucks, losing to Arizona, losing to the Bucks, losing to Jacksonville, losing to Houston, going 1-6 to get into their bye week. Then I had them losing to Washington, beat Arizona, losing to the Rams, losing to the Titans, losing to Minnesota, losing to Atlanta, beating Indianapolis, beating the Rams, losing to Carolina, and then beating San Fran, going 5-12. Again, a team you don't know where direction they're going. Sam Darnold could also be out after a year. They made the deal that way. Which, by the way, when you look at it, a lot of teams did. The Bengals did that with T. Higgins. Patriots did it with Stephon Diggs. They also kind of did it with Milton Williams, but I think it's like a guaranteed 3-year deal. They can get out of it in the 4th year if they wanted to, but I don't think that's going to happen. Going over the standings, I want to do everyone's standings again. Now, since we just finished up the NFC South and NFC West, we'll start on the NFC side. If you didn't check it out, 2 days ago I put out the NFC East and NFC North. Looking at it, you got the Eagles going 13-4, the Commanders going 12-5, the Cowboys going 5-12, and the Giants going 3-14. And then the NFC North, you got the Lions going 3-14. The Minnesota Vikings going 10-7, the Green Bay Packers going 9-8, and then the Bears going 7-10. And then we went over the NFC South. I didn't officially go over their final standings because I'm going to do it now. The Bucs, the first seed, winning the division. Not the first seed in the playoffs, but the division winner. Second being the Falcons, third being the Panthers, and fourth being the Saints. Then going into it, the NFC West being the Rams. The Niners at 12-5. My fault. I forgot. Rams 10-7. Cardinals 9-8. And then Cardinals going 9-8. Seattle going 5-12. And then going to the AFC side, the Bills going 13-4. Patriots going 11-6. Dolphins 9-8. Jets going 7-10. Bengals going 14-3, Ravens going 12-5 in the AFC North, Steelers going 6-11, Browns going 3-14 in the AFC South, which was Tuesday's episode. Texans doing 12-5, Jacksonville 5-12, Titans going 4-13, Colts going 4-13, Chiefs going. My fault. I actually did not write their record down. So let me go back for a second. AFC West, I had them going 11-6. Chargers going 10-7, Denver going 9-8, and the Raiders going 6-11. Now let's get into our playoff matchups, and then I'll go into my word predictions, playoff predictions, and then my draft order. And then I have a big thing to reveal after this thing is over. So the first seed for the AFC is the Bengals, second is the Bills, Texans, Chiefs, Ravens, Patriots, Chargers, going from 1 through 7 respectively. Then the first seed is going to be the Eagles, the Lions, the Bucks, the Niners, Commanders, the Rams, the Vikings. So the matchups will look like the Bengals and Eagles having the byes. For the AFC, the second-seeded Bills will face the seventh-seeded Chargers, the third-seeded Texans playing the sixth-seeded Patriots, the fourth-seeded Chiefs playing the fifth-seeded Ravens, my fault. And then the other side, the Lions playing the Vikings, the Bucks, the third seed Bucks playing the 6th seed Rams. The Lions are the 2nd seed, 7th seed is the Vikings, and the 4th seed Niners play the 5th seeded Commanders. And then going into my war predictions, starting with Coach of the Year, in my opinion, it's going to be Mike Vrabel. He's going to change his Patriots team from one of the worst teams to one of the better teams in the league. But my dark horse team in the lookout Coach of the Year will be the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans. He had a little bit of a down year. I know they made the playoffs because they won their division, but granted, that team wasn't great last year. And I see them they could make a big jump this year. I know I might have their record going one way, but I could see it being better than worse. So I think that could be it. Comeback play of the year, I actually had Derek Brown from Carolina. He got hurt last year. I think he's going to have a big year for that defense. My dark horse is going to be Stephon Diggs from the Patriots. He did tear his ACL, but he's looked a lot better. I think he could have a huge year with Drake May. He's going to be an influence on like Demario Douglas, Keyshawn Butte, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and their new rookie wide receiver, Kyle Williams. And then Defensive Rookie of the Year, I have it going to be Abdul Carter. I think he's going to win it. I think he's going to have a huge year in New York. But my dark horse is literally a dark horse in this one because not many people are going to probably pick him. But Shamar Stewart, and that's a name to watch out for. I know he only had like 3.5 sacks all throughout college, but I don't think that's the full story because when you watch the tape, he's actually really, really good. He was worth the 17th overall pick or 18th overall pick, wherever they selected. He's going to be a great player in this league. I think when Trey Henderson eventually does sign his extension in Cincinnati, he's going to have a huge year. Travis Hunter, I have winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. My dark horse being Tedro McMillan. I think Travis Hunter is just going to be the overall favorite. But to be honest, I could see Tedro McMillan having a huge year. Bryce Young and being a reason why the Carolina Panthers are very much fighting for the second spot in the division or just being very competitive. Travis Hunter, I think, is just going to be more of the favorable pick. Like, people are just going to want him. And then defensive player of the year, I have Micah Parsons. I think he's having a huge year. Dallas, he's been close the last couple of years. But my dark horse is going to be Chris Jones, a guy who was not talked about as much. He's going to probably have a huge year in that Chiefs defense. He's been a big role for the last couple of years. And then my offensive player of the year, I have Puka Nacua. Could have went Jamar Chase again or Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is my dark horse. I think the reason I'm putting him in a dark horse is because of J.J. McCarthy. I do think he's going to do well, but I just think Puka Nacua is going to have a huge year and be a reason why the Rams are going 10-7, then maybe 9-8. He's going to be a difference maker. And then my MVP is Joe Burrow. I think we saw it last year. He had the best stats out of all the quarterbacks, led the league in touchdowns and passing yards. I think he's going to do it again, especially if T. Higgins and Jamar Chase do it healthy. And this time I do think they're going to be a lot better than they were last year. I have them going 14-3 for a reason. And my dark horse is going to be Jayden Daniels. He put the league on notice last year. I think he's going to put the league on notice again this year. So maybe he'll end up winning MVP this year, but we'll see. Now let's go into my playoff predictions. Reason why I'm not going to do my draft order yet is because you need to figure out who's winning the Super Bowl. So the first matchup is we'll start on the AFC side. The Bills-Chargers. I think the Bills win that. I think it's a good game. Chargers run game is going to be legit this year, especially with Amari Hampton and Najee Harris. But I had the Bills winning a close game there. Then I have the Texans and the Patriots. I think this is going to be a fun game, but I think it's going to be, again, one of those games that's really close, going to go down to the wire. But I have Houston just because they have more of the playoff experience right now. C.J. Stroud's been in the playoffs twice since he's been in the league, in the 2 years he's been in the league. So I have them winning. Then I have the Chiefs and the Ravens as the 4-5 matchup. And the Chiefs, I actually have winning that game. And again, another very, very, very close matchup. They'll be facing the Bengals in the second round. Bills and Texans will be in the third, and also in the second round. Going to the NFC side of things, I have the Lions versus the Vikings. Again, Lions, I think, in a blowout. Buccaneers versus the Rams. I think the Buccaneers win that. Niners versus Washington. I have an upset here. Washington beating the Niners. They'll stay in the NFC side. Philly versus Washington. I have Philly winning that in a close game. I think it's going to be a little closer than it was last year. Tampa versus Detroit. I actually have an upset here. I have Tampa beating Detroit, who I think will be heavily favored in this game. And then going to the AFC side, I have the Bengals beating the Chiefs in a very much close game. Their matches in the playoffs have always been really close. And then I have the Texans upsetting the Bills going to the AFC Championship game. And then going to the AFC Championship game, I have the Bengals winning that in a close game over the Texans, going to the Super Bowl. And then I have another upset. I had the Buccaneers beating the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl, going to the second Super Bowl in 5 years. But then the Super Bowl, their run stops. They lose to the Bengals I think in more of a blowout type fashion. I don't think it'll be a complete blowout, but I think it'll be like a 10-point game. So I have the Bengals winning the Super Bowl, and Joe Burrow is your Super Bowl MVP. Now going to my draft order, which very much doesn't really change much other than maybe two teams switching, and it is. I'm just going to write the switch now so I go over it right. So with the draft order, it's going to be the Saints at 1, Giants at 2, 3 is going to be the Browns, 4 is going to be the Panthers, 5 is going to be the Colts, 6 is going to be the Titans, 7 is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars, 8 is going to be the Dallas Cowboys, 9 is going to be Seattle, 10 is going to be Pittsburgh, Raiders at 11, Bears at 12, Jets at 13, Falcons at 14, 15 is going to be the Cardinals, 16 is going to be the Dolphins, 17 is going to be the Packers, 18 is going to be the Broncos, 19 is going to be the Vikings, 20 is going to be the Chargers, 21 is going to be the Niners, 22 is going to be the Patriots, 23 is going to be the Ravens, 24 is going to be the Rams, 25 is going to be Commanders, 26 is going to be the Chiefs, 27 is going to be the Bills, 28 is going to be the Lions, 29 is going to be the Texans, 30 is going to be the Eagles, 31 is going to be the Buccaneers, and 32 is going to be the Bengals. So that's my NFL predictions this year. Starting next week, I'm starting a new series going over it's going to be my NBA overview, starting with it'll be like my off-season series, kind of talking about moves the teams could make. It'll be a very quite interesting offseason. I will include the teams that are currently in the playoffs. They're currently in the Eastern Conference Finals and Western Conference Finals. So I might cover them while they're still there, because I'm going to go by division, starting off with the Atlantic, then going to Metropolitan. That way, going forward, it'll be a 4-day series next week. And then the week after that, I might do an NHL one where I go over moves that each NHL team could possibly go into, but we'll figure it out next week. But thank you for watching. See you guys next week.